This video contains content that may disturb you and challenge your perception of reality. Ensure you're in a safe space before you continue. Welcome to Charlie Ghostlight. I'm Charlie, and tonight I've got 3 unsettling stories. First, a school shooting in Minneapolis left 2 children dead during prayer. Then, a nightclub collapse in Santo Domingo turned celebration into tragedy. And finally, FogVid24, where harmless fog sparked worldwide panic through online rumors. One story is real, one is tragic, and one shows how fear can spread faster than the truth. Together, they remind us how fragile safety really is. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the true stories of horror we uncover here. Story 1. Minneapolis School Mass Shooting. Annunciation Catholic School. The morning of August 27th, 2025, began like any other at Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. Children filed into the church connected to their school for a mass that was part of their weekly routine. Parents had dropped them off with the usual mix of hugs, backpacks, and reminders to pay attention. Inside, the church was calm. Teachers helped students settle into the pews, while younger kids whispered to one another before the service began. For many, it was a comforting, ordinary ritual, a moment of prayer, music, and community. But within minutes, that sense of peace was broken forever. At around 9:45 a.m., gunfire erupted from outside the church. A shooter aimed through the stained glass windows and opened side panels of the building, firing multiple rounds into the congregation of children, teachers, and elderly parishioners who had joined the students for the service. Panic spread instantly. Some students ducked under benches, others screamed and tried to run. Teachers threw themselves over groups of children, trying to shield them from the bullets. When the gunfire stopped, the devastation was unbearable. 2 children were dead, 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel and 10-year-old Harper Moisky. 15 other students were injured, along with 3 elderly members of the parish who had come to watch the children's mass. Fletcher Merkel was only 8 years old. His father later shared that Fletcher loved fishing more than anything. He would spend hours by the water with his dad, asking endless questions about lures and boats. Fletcher was curious, full of energy, and had just started to show a love for drawing. Harper Moisky was 10. Friends and teachers remembered her laugh first. It was loud, contagious, and filled the room. She loved reading stories aloud in class and had a habit of sharing her lunch snacks with kids who forgot theirs. The loss of these 2 children struck the community like a hammer. They were kids with hobbies, dreams, and families who loved them. In a setting meant for peace and worship, their lives were taken in a matter of seconds. In the hours after the shooting, parents gathered outside the school, desperate for news. Some were reunited with their children, hugging them tightly, while others were faced with unthinkable loss. Fletcher's father, speaking through tears, urged parents everywhere to give your kids an extra hug, because life can change in an instant. The Moisky family, while asking for privacy, requested that people show empathy instead of sympathy. They didn't want pity. They wanted people to hold compassion and to remember Harper not for how she died, but for the joy she spread in life. Vigils quickly sprang up across Minneapolis. Hundreds gathered in candlelight circles, holding photos of the victims, praying, and placing stuffed animals at makeshift memorials near the school. Church bells rang in memory of the children. Strangers embraced one another, united in grief. Amid the chaos, stories of courage emerged. Teachers had shielded students with their own bodies, directing them to safer exits when possible. Older students helped younger ones climb under benches or flee the building. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and rushed the wounded to hospitals. Officials described the actions of the school staff and students as bravery beyond measure. One teacher, still recovering from minor injuries, said through sobs that her only thought was, "If I could protect even one child, that's what I had to do." Authorities condemned the attack in the strongest possible terms. Minneapolis leaders called it unspeakable. Law enforcement vowed to investigate every detail of the shooting, from the weapon used to the motives of the attacker. At the state level, leaders pledged to review school security procedures and to support victims' families with counseling and financial aid. The Archdiocese of Minneapolis released a statement saying that what was supposed to be a sacred gathering had turned into a scene of horror, but they emphasized resilience. "We will not let violence steal faith from our children, because this tragedy struck a school, and specifically, children in a church service. It gained national attention immediately. The contrast was stark. A holy place designed for peace turned into a site of terror. News outlets across the country ran with images of shattered windows, police cars and children holding hands as they were escorted away. Across social media, hashtags honoring Fletcher and Harper trended. People from outside Minneapolis, even those with no connection to the city, expressed grief, outrage, and solidarity. Some shared artwork of angels, while others called urgently for reforms. Every mass shooting reignites difficult questions, and this event was no exception. Families asked why children weren't safe in schools or even churches. Gun control advocates pushed harder for restrictions, especially when it came to preventing firearms from reaching unstable individuals. Others stressed the importance of mental health awareness, urging for more resources to identify and support people before violence takes root. The conversation wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. For parents across the country, it was another terrifying reminder that even the most ordinary day could end in tragedy. The sight of children's backpacks lined up outside a crime scene was almost unbearable to watch. In the weeks following the shooting, Annunciation Catholic School closed temporarily. Counselors and trauma specialists were brought in to help surviving children process what they had experienced. The church, shattered both physically and emotionally, began repairs. Parish leaders said the rebuilding process would not just be about repairing glass and wood, but about restoring trust and creating a safe place again. Families of the victims spoke about their children's legacies. Fletcher's family launched a scholarship fund in his name to support kids who love the outdoors, while Harper's relatives encouraged people to spread kindness in her memory. Small acts, they said, like sharing a snack or making someone laugh, were ways to honor her life. This shooting was not just another headline. It was a tragedy that cut deep into the heart of a community. It forced parents, teachers, and leaders to confront questions with no easy answers. The victims were not soldiers on a battlefield or adults caught in an accident. They were children attending a church service, surrounded by people they trusted. That contrast between innocence and violence is what makes this event so haunting. And beyond Minneapolis, the story connects to larger themes: the fragility of safety in public spaces, the role of community in healing, and the ongoing struggle to balance freedom, security, and compassion in modern society. Story 2. The Jet Set nightclub roof collapse. It was April 2025 in Santo Domingo, the buzzing capital of the Dominican Republic. The Jet Set nightclub, one of the city's most famous spots for music and parties, was packed with more than 500 guests. People had come to enjoy the weekend, to dance, laugh, and forget about their worries. Inside the nightclub, the mood was electric. The air throbbed with music, lights flashed across the dance floor, and people raised their glasses in celebration. Many of the guests were young friends celebrating birthdays, couples on dates, groups of tourists checking out Santo Domingo's nightlife. To them, it was supposed to be just another unforgettable night out. No one in the crowd had the slightest idea that within an hour, this place of joy would become the scene of one of the deadliest urban tragedies in the city's history. At 12:44 a.m., everything changed. Without warning, the roof of the Jet Set nightclub gave way. First came a low cracking sound, like wood splintering under pressure. Then, within seconds, huge chunks of plaster, concrete, and metal came crashing down onto the hundreds of people below. The once lively music was replaced with horrifying screams. People scrambled in every direction, but there was nowhere safe to go. Heavy beams and shattered pieces of ceiling trapped guests under rubble. The club's flashing lights went dark, plunging the room into chaos as dust and smoke filled the air. Panic took over. Survivors pushed, shoved, and clawed their way toward the exits. Some people were trampled in the stampede. Others risked their lives to pull friends and strangers out from under the debris. By the time rescuers arrived, the scene was pure devastation. More than 236 people were killed, and over 180 others were badly injured. It was a disaster on a scale Santo Domingo had rarely seen before. Families rushed to hospitals and police stations, desperate to know if their loved ones had survived. Those who lived through the collapse described it as something out of a nightmare. One young woman recalled dancing with her friends when suddenly the ceiling above them just opened like the sky had fallen. She was knocked to the floor but managed to crawl out through a small gap near the stage. Another survivor described pulling a stranger from under the rubble with his bare hands, saying he could still hear faint cries for help beneath the collapsed roof. Hours later, emergency workers, firefighters, and police officers fought through the wreckage all night. They pulled bodies from under heavy slabs and carried the injured to waiting ambulances. But the number of dead kept climbing, leaving the entire city in shock. As the city mourned, everyone demanded answers. How could such a popular, busy nightclub collapse so suddenly? The investigation quickly revealed a series of alarming failures. The structure of the Jet Set building had long been criticized by engineers. The support columns that held up the roof were thinner than they should have been and were already weakened from years of use. Over time, the club had gone through several renovations. Each time, parts of the roof and interior were modified, but not always with proper permits or strong materials. Years earlier, a fire had damaged sections of the nightclub, including some of its supporting beams. Instead of fully replacing these parts, quick repairs had been made, repairs that may not have been strong enough to hold up the structure. Perhaps most shocking of all, just hours before the disaster, workers had installed new plasterboard in parts of the ceiling. Engineers later suggested that this last-minute renovation might have tipped the fragile balance, causing too much pressure on already weak supports. As news spread, attention turned to the authorities. How could a place with so many safety problems still be allowed to open its doors to hundreds of people? Critics accused city inspectors of ignoring warnings about the building's condition. Rumors spread that the nightclub's owners had close ties to officials, which may have led to safety checks being rushed or skipped. Families of the victims demanded justice, saying this was not just an accident, it was negligence. If the weak columns and unsafe repairs had been addressed, 236 people would still be alive. The Dominican government promised a full investigation, But the anger in Santo Domingo was clear. For many, the tragedy was a symbol of corruption and carelessness, putting profits before people's lives. The jet set collapse wasn't just numbers on a report. It tore families apart. Parents lost children. Friends lost friends. Survivors carried guilt, asking why they had lived when so many others had not. Hospitals were flooded with injured victims, some fighting for their lives, others left permanently disabled, the streets of Santo Domingo filled with grief. Memorials and candlelight vigils were held outside the ruins of the nightclub. Photos of the victims, many of them smiling young faces, were placed on makeshift altars with flowers and candles. For weeks, the city was silent at night. Nightclubs and bars stood nearly empty. People were too afraid to go out, haunted by what had happened at Jet Set. The idea of fun and safety inside such places had been shattered. The collapse of Jet Set will be remembered as one of Santo Domingo's darkest nights. Beyond the immediate tragedy, it forced the city to face deep questions. Why were building codes ignored? Who allowed unsafe venues to operate? And how many other buildings across the city might also be unsafe? For many residents, the disaster was not just about one nightclub. It was about the risks people face daily when greed and negligence overpower responsibility. The tragedy left scars that will last for years. Survivors and families continue to fight for justice, hoping that no other community will have to live through such heartbreak again. Story 3. FogVid24 Conspiracy. It all started in late 2024 and early 2025. Cities in both the United States and the United Kingdom were suddenly covered with unusually thick fog. It wasn't just the normal morning mist people were used to. It was heavy, it was strange, and it lingered longer than usual. Videos began flooding TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. People filmed streets where cars were barely visible, neighborhoods that looked like ghost towns, and skies that seemed swallowed by a white blanket. Someone online gave it a catchy name, FogVid24. The name spread quickly, combining fog with COVID, hinting at a new invisible danger in the air. At first, most people laughed it off. But soon, that joke turned into a worldwide panic. Social media thrives on drama, and FogVid24 became the perfect storm. Influencers, conspiracy channels, and random users all jumped in. Posts claimed the fog was toxic, warning people not to breathe outside air. Others said it was the government releasing biological weapons. Some videos suggested drones were flying overhead, spreading smart dust to control populations. A TikTok video even showed a user pointing at drones in the distance while coughing dramatically into the camera. Millions watched it, and many believed it was proof. Theories multiplied. Some said FogVid24 was a new kind of virus in the air. Others claimed it was a military experiment gone wrong. A few believed it was an attempt to control the weather or reduce populations. Within weeks, hashtags like #FogVid24, #toxic fog, and #air poison were trending worldwide. To make the conspiracy sound more real, people began pulling out old history cases. The most popular one mentioned was Operation Sea Spray. Back in 1950, the US Navy secretly sprayed bacteria into the air over San Francisco to test how vulnerable cities were to germ attacks. This experiment caused health problems for residents and was only revealed years later. Conspiracy theorists online used this as proof. See? Governments have done this before. Why wouldn't they do it again? This historical tie-in gave FogVid24 extra weight. People thought, if it happened once, it can happen again. As more people believed the rumors, everyday life started to change. Some wore gas masks outside, while others locked themselves indoors whenever fog appeared. In London, a group of parents kept their children home from school, fearing the air would poison them. In New York, videos showed people holding towels over their faces while walking through the streets. Shops began selling out of air purifiers and N95 masks again, reminding many of the COVID-19 pandemic days. Uber drivers reported fewer rides during foggy mornings. Cafes near busy fog-covered streets saw fewer customers. Even local tourism in some cities slowed down because visitors didn't want to risk toxic fog exposure. The paranoia was growing. Social media platforms became the fuel for this conspiracy fire. Algorithms love content that shocks people, and FogVid24 videos were exactly that. The scarier the video, the more it got pushed to millions of feeds. One clip showed a woman saying her neighbor collapsed in the fog. Another showed mysterious trucks driving around at night, supposedly refilling the air with chemicals. None of these had proof, but they spread fast. Even celebrities joined the conversation. Some joked about it, but others asked serious questions, which only added to the panic. If famous people were talking about it, then surely it must be real, right? Eventually, scientists and meteorologists had to step in to calm the storm. Weather experts explained that the fog wasn't mysterious at all. It was a result of natural weather patterns. Specifically, they pointed to temperature inversions combined with high humidity. Meteorologists said FogVid24 was just ordinary weather, nothing more. Scientists checked for signs of chemicals or biological agents in the air. The results showed no toxins, no poisons, no smart dust, and no drones spraying anything. It was just water droplets, the same as any fog. But here's the problem. Scientific facts don't spread as fast as fear. Even after clear explanations, many people didn't believe the scientists. They thought the experts were paid off or hiding the truth. This is a common pattern with conspiracies. Once people believe something, no amount of evidence can easily change their minds. YouTube and TikTok were still filled with dramatic videos claiming FogVid24 was a cover-up. Some even suggested scientists were part of the conspiracy. It became less about facts and more about distrust in authority. Although FogVid24 began in the US and UK, it quickly became a global discussion. Countries like Canada, Australia, and Germany also experienced normal seasonal fog. But thanks to social media, locals began connecting their fog to FogVid24 too. Soon, people around the world were sharing personal stories. I went jogging in the fog and now I feel sick. My grandma fainted last night. Could it be FogVid24? Why is no one telling us the truth? The conspiracy had gone international, even though every scientist agreed it was just fog. FogVid24 may sound silly in hindsight, but it taught us some very real lessons. Fear spreads faster than truth. A scary video can travel to millions in minutes, while calm scientific explanations barely reach thousands. History adds fuel, because governments have lied before, like Operation Sea Spray. People find it easy to believe new conspiracies. Everyday life gets disrupted. Even without proof, fear alone can change behavior, hurt businesses, and make people distrust one another. Misinformation is powerful. Social media isn't just a place for fun. It shapes how we see the world, even turning natural fog into a global poison scare. FogVid24 wasn't really about the fog. It was about how people react to uncertainty. When something strange happens, like unusually thick fog, people want answers. If they don't get clear answers fast enough, their minds fill the gaps with dramatic theories. This conspiracy showed just how vulnerable society is to viral misinformation. In a world where everyone carries a camera and has access to millions through social media. Even natural events can be turned into worldwide fears. FogVid24 wasn't poison. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a government plot. It was just fog. But for a few months, it became the scariest fog the internet had ever seen. So there you have it. 3 stories from 2025 that shook people in very different ways. The Jet Set nightclub collapse reminded us how negligence and corruption can turn joy into tragedy in a single moment. And FogVid24 revealed how quickly fear and misinformation can spread, twisting something as ordinary as fog into a worldwide panic. All 3 point to the same truth. Our sense of safety is fragile. Sometimes it's stolen by greed, sometimes by failure, and sometimes by our own imaginations. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share this with someone who needs to hear these stories.